Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in day to talk about the Witch Watch anime, episode number 6. This episode is titled Under the Lover's Tree. Of course, the original Witch Watch manga is written by Kento Shinohara. I guess it's also written and illustrated, I don't know. You guys get the whole point. It's a manga made by one guy named Kento Shinohara, right? And of course, the anime production is being created by Bilberry Animation Studios. And this episode of the Witch Watch anime covers chapters 12, along with 16 and 17 of the original manga. And let me say, this may be the best episode of Witch Watch we've gotten so far. And I say that as like it's a question that we don't know the answer to. No, this episode, I was tearing up by the end of it. I remember reading this moment in the original manga. What was that? Almost, gosh, it was about probably 4 years ago or about a time around then. And I remember I wasn't really reading the Witch Watch manga weekly then, like I wasn't liking all of the jokes it was bringing up, and I was scrolling through on what was known back in the day as Twitter, now it's known as X or whatever you want to call it. But I remember scrolling through it back then. I remember somebody just saying like, oh yay, there's this new series called Blue Box that just came out, and hey, this Witch Watch series just had a really nice romance-based chapter also. Like, I'll be interested to really see where these series all go from here on out, pretty much, right? And I remember that was the same week, and I'm like, you know what? I really liked Oscar Lost in Space, which of course was Kento Shinohara's previous work, and I was like, let me go back, read the manga, and since then, I've just fallen in love with this series. I absolutely love it. And this was really the perfect adaptation of this series of events that we possibly could have gotten here with the Witch Watch anime. And really, without any further ado, of course, this is the Witch Watch episode reviews done by a manga reader's perspective, so we're pretty much just going to be going through all of the events of the episode, and then talking about just like how the anime did it better in this episode, because there was just a whole lot that was done extremely well, and also just like all of the changes that were done in the anime production, because of course, like I said, this covers chapter numbers 12, 16, and 17. Of course, I was wondering, like, last episode we didn't cover chapter number 12, I'm like, that's a little weird, but it really just got rearranged here, which honestly is probably for the best, being with the content material of not episode 12, but the 12th chapter of the manga that we get here in this episode number 6. But yeah, really, without any further ado, let's just go and hop into the events of Witch Watch episode number 6, again titled Under the Lover's Tree. So the very first part of the episode is we see that Nico is helping out another one of the girls in her class, giving her a love charm pretty much, just saying like, hey, this will pretty much just help you out a little bit, and maybe you'll have some good luck with some romance in the future. So we see that she pretty much just casts it on a bracelet on her wrist, and Nico pretty much just helps this girl out. And we know this here in a moment. There's a guy sort of staring at this very shadily in the background, right? But we then cut away from this scene as the opening theme of Witch Watch plays. Of course, this is Watch Me by Yoasobi. I am pretty sure, being that I'm recording this video a little bit, pretty much very late. It's like 8 days after this episode actually aired. If I'm not mistaken, we may have the full single out by Yoasobi. I do not remember if it was, I mean, actually just like on my computer in front of me. Watch Me... Which, if I can spell, yeah, I'm pretty sure they went through and released a full version of it. Yeah, 2 days ago. It looks like it's about like a 3-minute bet more song, of course, by Yoasobi. So I'll listen to the full version here later, but it's pretty cool to know, like, hey, the full single's out now, not just the 30-second anime intro thing. So that's pretty neat right there, right? But like I said, we get the opening theme at that moment, and just what a good opening theme it is, right? But at this point, we cut into the episode proper, as we see there's a few weight jokes that get made, as in both Nico and Morito are sort of walking around, and Morito's like, hey, if I'm going to protect you properly, I sort of want to know how much you weigh and all of this various stuff, right? And Nico's like, oh, I don't want to tell you that. It's like not the way to get into a girl's heart, pretty much, right? Because of course, Morito just has this very blank expression as she's sort of going through and saying all of this, right? And let me also mute Discord here in this moment. That would probably be a decent enough thing to do, all things considered, right? But, alright, where were we? Yes, Nico also really just thinks about, like, how popular Moi is here at the school. Like, really just everybody's really like him, and he does a bunch of cool stuff that, like, even though he started off school year with that whole, like, arm growth thing, and everybody thought he was weird, Moi has really gotten a whole lot better and, like, been able to come out and be like, hey, everybody really just likes Morito, right? But we then cut over to the Otiki household, as we see that Nico and Conchi are helping Morito do a little bit of training, right? As we see that Nico's pretty much using her magic to scatter a bunch of trees around an area, and we see that Morito is wearing a blindfold, right? And pretty much Morito just has the blindfold on, and uses some, like, extra sense, pretty much, to pretty much go out and grab all the leaves with his hand, and, like, these precise pinpoint movements here in the moment, being able to do it with his eyes closed, pretty much, right? And pretty much we see that this happens, and then, oh, hey, Morito's getting good at his training. And as we sort of go over and cut inside now, we see that pretty much Conchi walks into Nico's room, and he just says, like, hey, Nico, we all know that you're in love with Morito. What are you going to do about this, right? And Nico pretty much tries to make a lot of excuses how she wants to help other people with their love lives, but doesn't really want to mess with hers, just really because she's afraid about, like, how Morito could reject her, being that Morito has, like, how, like, these... He's not very expressive and all that various stuff, right? And of course, as they're talking about this, Conchi's like, right, we need some way to make you seem, like, very obvious to him, so he'll really start to think about you. And in this moment, there's a commercial that comes on the TV pretty much saying, like, hey, all of the guys will catch this woman's vision if she's got long, flowing hair, pretty much, right? So, with this sort of idea, both Nico and Conchi sort of come up with this plan, right? We learn that Morito pretty much walks through the same corridor every day to get to lunch, so during that time, Nico's also going to walk through the corridor, and of course, Conchi, being a Tengu, can control the wind, so he's going to control the wind to make it blow Nico's hair in pretty much the wind, and make Morito's heart flutter here in the moment, right? When it gets to the time to pretty much execute that plan, and hey, it seems like it should be working. Like, Nico looks very beautiful, her hair is flowing in the wind along with her dress and all of that, and oh no, Morito has a very blank expression, like he's just, like, not paying attention at all. So with this, Nico pretty much signals over to Conchi, like, hey, give me more wind. She gives him more wind, and it pretty much makes Nico look like this big, demonic, crazy creature, pretty much, right? And everybody's like, whoa, what is that, right? There's also the nurse teacher walking through at the same time, just like, oh, hey, are you okay, Nico? Like, what in the world's going on here? And she's like, oh, no, why is all of this wind just, like, centralized around you? And she goes down to pretty much bend down to try to figure out all of this, but of course, she is carrying a folder full of papers in her arms. And oh, no, all of these papers get blown away by Conchi's wind and are scattered all over the school grounds, right? And then the teacher says, oh no, those are all the girls' measurement papers, like, this isn't very good. But of course, Morito puts his sense training into good work, pretty much jumps up in the air and goes around and picks up all of the papers with his eyes closed. And, like, there's honestly a pretty cool moment where he's just, like, got his eyes covered with his hand and is holding the papers behind him, serving them to the teacher. And he's like, I did not look at a single one. And the whole end point of this is like, hey, Nico just caused more commotion, making everybody like Moe even more into school, right? So like, hey, Morito is loved by all. It's honestly a pretty good little thing, but back in the day, definitely the anime, I think, made me like it a whole lot more than the original manga did, but honestly, just a really nice moment at the end of the day, right? Well, this is where we get our first break of the episode, as we pretty much see that, like, hey, the girl who Nico's giving to love charm to in the very first scene of the episode, we see that she's over and talking with her crush, pretty much, asking him out. And that's just, I love these little break scenes that we get. It's like, whoa, that's pretty cool, hey, she's doing the thing, right? But as we cut back into the episode, we pretty much cut back into a guy named Ishii asking to talk with Nico on the upcoming school field trip, right? And pretty much we also see that Nico goes over and talks with Kara and Arashino about this, and Kara pretty much informs her, like, hey, this is the legend of the lover's tree, pretty much. If two people eat lunch under this tree where we're going to the field trip at, they'll pretty much fall in love and they'll go out forever, pretty much, right? It's like, whoa, that's pretty crazy, right? And of course, in the moment, Conchi is listening in on all of this, so whenever him and Nico get back home, he's like, hey, we need to meet about this, like, I really think Moe does care about you, but he just doesn't think that he's allowed to show it, is what Con pretty much sits down here and explains to Nico here in a moment, right? And Nico's like, oh, but what am I supposed to do here? Like, I want to go out with Morito, but she has all these very conflicting feelings going on within her, right? Well, we then cut to the day of the field trip, as it seems like, oh, hey, everybody's got to hike up this mountain before they can all go eat lunch, and hey, then all of the real romance stuff starts, as we see, of course, the homeroom teacher, Miss Makua, is also pretty much leading the class by saying an Uran Mirage line, and of course, Arashino's like, oh, yes, I understand that. honestly, it's pretty funny now that we know the whole dynamic between both Areshino and Miss Makura, pretty much how they're going back and forth through all of this, right? I at least think it's pretty interesting, right? Well, Morito's sort of walking alone, and Nico sort of walks up and just is like, oh, hey, Morito, can we walk and talk, pretty much? And we sort of see, like, yeah, that's what they're doing, right? And pretty much we see that Nico just, like, asks a few prying questions, like, saying, like, hey, well, you're my bodyguard and all, but, like, hey, I've got to go talk to somebody at this tree later. And she pretty much is trying to coax Morito into saying, like, hey, yeah, don't go, I want to go with you, pretty much. But, of course, Morito's a little too pig-headed to sort of get through all of it. He's like, oh, hey, I understand. If you got something you want to go talk with, then I will be sure pretty much not to come there, pretty much, right? And this is, of course, not what Nico wants to hear, and she sort of runs away here in the moment. And she doesn't really run away, she runs ahead of all of the pack and pretty much loses Morito in the background, right? But of course, as she's running away, we see that Morito just, like, has a little bit of a despondent look on his face, like, he really doesn't like this turn of events either, right? Well, we then get the second break of the episode, as we pretty much just see, like, hey, instead of Nico and Moi walking together, it's to do with them walking alone, as we pretty much just see, like, the first scene of, like, whenever we fade out, it's like, hey, Morito's walking alone, then we cut to commercial, and, like, hey, we come back in, and it's Nico walking alone for a cut back into the episode, where we see that Moi is pretty much just walking around, and we get a big focus on one of the characters we met in the first episode, of course, named Keigo Makami. Of course, this was a character we see very predominantly in the opening sequence of the Witch Watch, so he will become more important, I promise you, but I even think the next episode shows a little bit of relevance for Keigo, all things considered, right? And honestly, this is one of my jobs of remembering if this was in the manga or not, and I legitimately do not. Let me actually go back and check that, because I was scrolling through the chapters earlier, and I was sort of scrolling through them, and I honestly forgot this section happened, because I watched half this episode yesterday at the recording of this video, and the other half today at the recording of this video, and I just forget if they have this interaction here. It doesn't look like they actually had this to begin with, right? But of course, Moi's walking around and he sort of interacts with Keigo here, and they talk about some, like, random, like, band subculture and all of that various stuff, right? But pretty much as all of this is happening, a girl walks up to Morito, right? And just is like, hey, can we go over here and talk, pretty much? And Morito pretty much goes and heads along with her, right? Well, of course, we now cut over to where Nico is actually sort of going through and walking around, as we see that she's like, hey, I need to go over to the tree to meet up with Ishii and all of those other people, right? And she pretty much heads over and walks over, just looking around, she's like, oh man, it's almost like this tree's like a very crowded airport lobby, pretty much, right? As I really love this joke, it's like, yeah, everybody's around here, and there's a bunch of people with various signs saying, like, hey, this girl over here, this guy over here, like, please, I want to talk to you over here, right? And Nico pretty much looks around and just sees, like, oh, there's a sign for my name, Nico Watsuki, right? And she walks over, and there's, like, 50 guys just all standing there, right? And Nico's like, are you guys all trying to ask me out? Like, this is crazy, right? But of course, all of these guys really just want love charms, so their other relationships will go better in their eyes, pretty much, right? And Nico's like, I don't want to have this much responsibility, pretty much, and runs away and uses the spell and to make herself smaller, so she pretty much completely hides and gets out of this moment, right? And whenever she does this, she also pretty much hops on her magic broom to pretty much get away from this entire situation. And as she does, she's not particularly paying attention to where she is flying, so she ends up flying and bumps right into somebody's shirt and falls right into their shirt pocket, right? And hey, this is anime and manga, so who other's shirt pocket would she fall into other than Morito's, pretty much, right? And she's just like, oh, who is this pocket? I need to get out of here as quick as I can. She looks up and, oh, it's Moi, pretty much, right? And we see this girl is sort of going like, hey, Morito, I wanted to ask if you want to go out with me, all of this. She's pretty much confessing to him. I mean, she's not pretty much, she is just confessing to him in the moment. And this really, like, sets Nico's, like, heart ablaze almost. She's like, oh, what is all of this, right? As we just see that, of course, this girl confesses to her. And Morito just says, like, hey, I'm sorry, I really don't know you that well, so I cannot reciprocate your feelings as you want me to, pretty much, right? And she says, like, well, do you like anybody, Moi? And Morito's just like, no, I don't really like anyone. And Nico, who is sort of like pulling herself up to the top of this pocket, looking at this situation, starts to fall down in the pocket as I really love the visual that we get here in the anime. This was something that wasn't really properly done in the manga. It was done the same way, but just like the visuals that we get here of like Nico clutching her chest, as we sort of see like this orb of light start to swell down in her hands pretty much, as it seems like Nico is following in deep to a watery abyss pretty much, right? And as Nico's sort of falling down here, there's a little bit of pause in Morito's voice, as Morito just goes like, but no, actually, there's someone very precious to me, right? And of course he's talking about Nico's, he just says like, hey, it's somebody who's always getting himself into trouble and going through all of these various things, right? But eventually he's like, hey, but I still want to look out for her, pretty much, right? And the girl who's asking Morito about just says like, hey, well, I mean, has there ever been a part, like you said, you don't like her, but has there ever been a part where you think that you may have felt some type of love or anything for her, pretty much, right? And at this point, Morito just goes silent again, as Nico just thinks like, oh yeah, there was a moment whenever I felt that. As she remembers all the way back to a time long, long ago, as she remembers that, of course, she's crying in the road, pretty much, and Morito walks over saying like, hey, were you getting bullied again? And Nico's just crying, and says like, no. And she says that her dad left, and she said that pretty much like, hey, her father and her mother really weren't getting along. It's really hard for a human and a witch to get along and have a happy marriage. And really, he left because Nico had this magic burst, pretty much, right? As we go over to Nico's house, as we see that, like, a portion of it is completely blown up and destroyed. As we see that Nico's magic really just went out of control and caused a bunch of damage around here, causing her father to leave, pretty much, right? And Nico is just crying and crying here in the moment. And as she does this, Morito just walks over and gives her a nice, big hug. And Nico sort of like crying a bit more, and Morito just says something to akin of like, hey, I'll be here for you and all that stuff. And Nico just starts to like calm down. She starts to stop crying a little bit. She just like tells Morito thanks pretty much. As we end this flashback, we cut back to the present, where Morito just walks away from this girl and just is like, yeah, I think I've thought of a moment. As we see the magic swell back up in Nico here in the moment, and the music and everything, it's just absolutely beautiful. As Nico's also thinking in pocket like, oh no, the Insmollen spell is about to wear off, as she gets on her magic broom and starts to fly away from the area. But of course, a gust of wind has to come in this moment and blow back on Nico, pushing her back, and she pretty much gets out of the spell and comes crashing down onto Morito. But Morito, of course, is able to act fast and catches Nico bridal style in his arms, pretty much, right? And there's an awesome little moment where Nico just says, like, hey, Morito, aren't I heavy? And Morito's like, hey, no, it's okay, I'm strong. As we see that Kanchi is sitting in a tree here in a moment, watching all this happen, as this old guy walks up and just says like, hey young man, what are you doing sitting in that tree over there, right? And Kanji's like, I'm sorry, I'll get out of it, right? And the guy just says like, hey, if you want to go to high places, you gotta chase for your dreams, pretty much, right? And he also just says a bunch of this other stuff like, hey, aren't you gonna go over to where all those our kids are under that tree over there, right? And Khan's like, no, I mean, it's supposed to be like a famous lover's tree or something. I don't have a lover, so I've really got no point to go over there, pretty much, right? And it's this moment where this guy says, oh, really? Well, legends are a fickle thing, and just like rumors, pretty much, right? As he pretty much explains, like, hey, back in the day, rumors change over time. That tree over there, that big, great fig tree, it's just called the Lover's Tree now because it looks so big and majestic. But actually, that rinky-dink tree over there is the real one, and Kanji's like, what are you talking about, old man? But this guy's wife walks over in the moment, and the guy just says, like, hey, we should know we were the ones who started that rumor oh so long ago. As he points over to the actual tree that, of course, made these two a couple, as Kanji sort of looks over to where he's like, what plane tree? As he looks over and just gets a big smile on his face. Well, at this point, Kara and Areshino, of course, Nico's friends, run over to where Kanchi is and just says, like, hey, have you seen Nico around here? And Kanchi sort of is like, no, I haven't seen them whatsoever, not at all. I don't know where Nico could be at all, right? He's like, hey, you want to go over to that big lover's tree over there? And Kara's like, are you trying to ask me out? But Kanchi's like, no, I don't think that old legend's true, at least as we think it, pretty much, right? As we just cut over to the actual lover's tree, and I love how the anime portrays this, as we just see these two older people walking to the tree, sit down, and as they sit down, we get a cut to Nico and Morito currently sitting under that tree. And that is where we end this episode of Witch Watch. We play the ending theme, Maho Spice Bayou, and we then get the next episode preview, which is Khan and Nico's channel, and the tea ceremony is a piece of tea cake. But oh my gosh, this scene, like, I'm almost getting like goosebumps, and just my eyes are almost tearing up just talking about this moment. The way that the anime does it is so beautiful and so nice. It's just this really build-up of a moment, ever from the point where we see Nico sinking into this abyss pretty much, to getting back up and out of it and getting ready to live her life as is, like, after understanding, like, hey, she is a precious person to Morito, of course, like Kanchi predicted earlier in the episode. And just the episode from there, as we just progress to the whole idea of, like, hey, out of the flashback, Nico wears off the spell, Morito carries her bridal style, hey, this old guy yells at Kanchi to get out of the tree and, like, has some old sage wisdom, pretty much, and just is like, hey, it worked for us, and that's the tree over there. And we just see that Morito and Nico are sitting under it now. It's such a beautiful thing. I love the visuals we get in this episode. I love the OST here at the end, and I just love how it all goes together to make an anime episode that made me cry. Like, this was just so nice and beautiful. And Witch Watch episode number, whatever this is, 6, you did a good job. That's all I can say. You had one job to do, which was to make this scene as beautiful as it was when I initially read it. And you did. You absolutely did. Thank you, Kinto Shinohara. Thank you, Bilberry Animation Studios. You guys did good. But of course, into all of the various anime changes, of course, the way this episode plays out is actually very simple. So the very first scene that we see before the opening plays is actually the beginning of chapter 16 of the manga. We then fade into the entirety of chapter number 12, and then play 16 all sequentially, then play 17 all sequentially from there, pretty much, right? So a little bit of just reordering to sort of get this more effective, like, hey, the love charm, bring it into more of the episode instead of, like, hey, introduce it halfway in the episode. It's just a better way of doing it. And of course, the really only added scene that I could tell that happened in this episode was this moment where we get introduced to Keigo a little bit early, because if I'm not mistaken, we really get introduced to him in the next, like, 2 or 3 chapters, and that's where he starts to become a bigger focus in the series, while here we sort of introduced him an episode earlier, just give him a bit more relevance going into, like, hey, he will be becoming a major character as far as time goes on, right? But either way, really good episode of Witch Watch, and of course, the next episode, like I said, is titled Khan and Nico's channel, along with the tea ceremony is a piece of tea cake. So those are going to be 2 fun parts of the next episode to listen to, or watch, I guess, also. But yeah, again, this is Witch Watch episode number 6, again, titled Under the Lover's Tree, and yeah, the great anime episode, like, what can I say about that? But yeah, for all that out of the way, thank you guys so very much if I can speak, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Witch Watch episode number 6. Of course, I've covered Witch Watch 5 other times, at least the anime here on this channel. I've also talked about the manga a lot in my weekly Shonen Jump series, so like, hey, if you want to see any other anime and manga related content, go to the YouTube channel. I've got it all uploaded there, and you can be like, whoa, that's really cool. This guy talks about anime and manga, sometimes Witch Watch, sometimes other things. But yeah, go check out the YouTube video there, and go check out the YouTube channel, do all of that. I'm sorry, I watched a brilliant anime episode, and now my mind is just completely scrambled going through it. But yeah, for all that out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time for Witch Watch episode number 6. Again, this was, next time I'll catch you for episode number 7. This is episode number 6, titled Under the Lover's Tree, and I'll catch you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma 231, crying my eyes out. I'll see you guys next time.